Hi, students. Today we're going to be talking about Poe, Conan Doyle, and Ratiocination. Okay. So first, let's be clear on how to pronounce the word. So I did go into it a little bit. It was actually from 1534 in the English language when it first appeared. So it's been around a while. So I kind of broke it down. Ratiocination. Okay, process of exact thinking or a reasoned train of thought. So you can see how Poe tries to use that somewhat unsuccessfully, but it is kind of rediscovered by Conan Doyle and brought to fruition there in the character of Sherlock Holmes. And I'll go over some of his vocabulary in a minute here when you get into the Hound of the Baskervilles and the introduction and all that for next week. Okay, first let's go back to Poe. We talked about last week how some things don't really make sense. Were there really logical deductions to lead you to think it was an orangutan that committed the murders? And in the murders on the Rue Morgue, okay? So, not really. So he was kind of too clever by one, and, didn't really. They kind of come out of the blue, as some of the students said last week. And now remember, metaphorically, and I think I mentioned this last week, that metaphorically, an orangutan, so I think this would have been, was it before Darwin or not? Because there were actually others that had similar ideas to Darwin. Okay, so primitive man, basically. So how tame were orangutans? So there was one in a zoo in America around this time. Post time. Now, so there's that, but I think it's also a metaphor for the human. It's not really about an orangutan. It's about a certain kind of person. Okay, so I think we're clear on that. I think also, now why do you think Poe chose Paris as the location of these stories? Well, for one thing, big cities in the U.S. didn't even have a police force. So remember, it was it governor or mayor of New York City, Teddy Roosevelt. So remember, he went on to be president. So it was the late 19th century before New York City, and then he also made sure they had copper badges, and thus they were called coppers. And so it wasn't until around, 1895 that even New York City had police officers, and they weren't always the most reliable. Of course, those that worked the night shift and all that. Okay, but it did provide jobs. But it didn't provide a good scene for Poe, so he chose Paris that had a police force. And remember, he wants to show that his main character, protagonist, is better than the police force. So that's the contrast there. Also, Poe was capitalizing on an interest in urban crime. And I'll post this article. Let's see. So it talks about urban crime was an area of acute interest in the 19th century in America and Europe because the public feared that it was rampant and out of control of the police. To respond to this concern, Poe first uses the term, the R word, and then applies this technique to help solve two murder mysteries and a tale of espionage. Okay, so the purloined letter, of course, isn't about murder. Okay, but they're both set in Paris, professional police force, and there's a picture here as well. He looks more like a Napoleonic soldier, but anyway. Let's see, what else do I want to say? So Poe tries to develop a new system of establishing relationships between unknown events and the motives or solutions to complex problems. So maybe it's more general than just crime, okay? And who knows, it might reflect on literature as a whole as well, about how, between writer, reader, the text, that whole relationship that the signs and signifiers, as Umberto Eco likes to say. So remember, even Poe's fictional detective, break down the name, and, first, the whole business about puzzles, and the name. So let me get to that there. Let's see if I can find that. So, remember the non-professional detective's name, Dupin. Of course, he's always making fun of the inferior tactics, in the same way that I think Sherlock Holmes does of Chief Inspector Lestrade, isn't it? Lestrade? Of Scotland Yard. Okay. So I think Scotland Yard is a little older, but for whatever reason he chose Paris. I guess bring in the French, bring in, who knows, the pipe, all that. Secret weapons, secret murders, cosmopolitan, but also kind of mysterious city. I was going to say town, but not, even at that time, it was definitely a city. So let's see. Oh yeah. So officially, Auguste Dupin's official title is Chevalier, which I think doesn't mean like gentleman. So it's equivalent to master detective in French. Auguste means the most revered. So the first name, Auguste, means most revered. Dupin is associated with the verb to dupe. So his name and title have ambiguous meanings. Okay. So more literally, these stories can then be interpreted that Dupin is the most revered trickster to criminals. He is questioning the public's irrational beliefs that scientists can solve modern complex crimes. Okay? So much for Scotland Yard and for whoever it is in Paris that would solve crimes. All right. So again, I think, so this article also goes into, or blog post goes into, the mystery of Marie Roget, but we're not reading that. So that's the third. Maybe I'll post it just for fun. So it does get into, it relates to a true story in journalism. So on here it has Mary Cecilia Rogers, who was the murder victim in 1841, who was the inspiration for Poe to write about Mary Roget. Okay. What else do we need to say about this? So you can see already the differences. The contrast with science, I think, is there. So nowadays, I don't think it would match our forensics unit. So I notice even Cal State LA has a great, I guess, forensic program for that kind of work. And a lot of people now want to study that. Or are interested. I don't know if they make it through a program, but yeah. So it's interesting. If Ratiocination would be able to match wits with forensic scientists now. I rather doubt it, especially not in Poe. I mean, Poe, as we said, it's kind of far-fetched. So let's move on to Sherlock Holmes. I think you're going to find the connections with Sherlock Holmes a little more believable. Let me see if I can find it. So some of the vocabulary in Sherlock Holmes. So he kind of takes that up. So we're kind of transitioning to that. If I can find it, which, let's see here. So I'm trying to get to my notes, articles on Sherlock Holmes. And of course, I'll just talk about the walking stick for a minute at the beginning of Hound of the Baskervilles, where watch that scene, see if you think it's a lot more believable. I think it is. Poe is more literary, in a way more gothic, more mysterious for sure, more into almost horror, the way he would get people's attention with those murders, although the purloined letter doesn't have a murder. So look at the way that Holmes kind of tests Watson when they talk about the walking stick. So I think I'm going to leave it at that and see if I can get this thing posted before class. So I will post the articles online as well that get you thinking, beyond just the story. I think we have to do that, give a little bit of history, get a little bit of etymology, word history, and of course Sherlock Holmes and the author Conan Doyle probably drew a lot from Poe, okay? Because it's, for one thing, it's in English. So why they didn't choose London, Scotland Yard, I guess we'd have to do some research on that and find out. So that might be something worth pursuing, Scotland Yard. And whether Paris was really that bad in terms of solving crimes. As it is in America, what percentage of crimes do you think are actually solved? Not just pinned on people. A lot of the same suspects or felons. So I think it's probably 50% of serious crimes. Smaller crimes, less than that, I'm sure, like burglaries and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to sign off and see you in a little while. Bye.